I'm Eva Oh, and this is the Teakink podcast. I've been a dominatrix since 2011, and I would like to spill the tea on my life. Thank you for listening. Designing a BDSM dungeon. The architects, the contractors, the inspiration. It can be quite a process, or you can just throw a few things together. But the way that I do things. So the first time that I properly thought of creating a space from the ground up was when I was building a house in Bali. And I had already collected inspiration over the years. I did start in a BDSM dungeon when I first started my career, and it was your traditional sort of aesthetic. So blacks, reds, heavy, lots of gear everywhere, kind of ominous. But what I was more interested in was metal minimalism and a taste of the execution room. Now, this sounds dark, and it is, but I will explain. I am not exactly sure where this came from. It may have been some conversations that I had with Mistress Danielle Blunt over COVID, when we were talking about ways that we could connect, and we thought about topics that were of interest to us. And one of them was about potentially death and the extreme emotions of life. And I think during this process, we came to both understand that we had a shared interest in the way that spaces such as execution rooms were designed. And she has actually given me a book that I have in my bookcase over there. But maybe I will indulge you in what book that is in the show notes later. But what is fascinating about those spaces to me, for example, there was one picture in this picture book of execution rooms where there is the bed that they would have that person on, and there is a microphone that's been dropped, just like no special rigging system, just a corded microphone that's sort of hanging from the middle of the ceiling over where the head would be, kind of like a last opportunity for your words to be shared and spoken. And I think that within the context of actual sentencing somebody to death, I am clearly not an advocate for that. But I am interested in the fact that these spaces exist and how people are designing for them. And I am interested because I am interested in the human experience and the edges of how emotion can be. And so therefore, my point is that I am interested in looking at spaces like this because I bring those elements into my space. So, for example, in a lot of these spaces, there is kind of a one-way viewing system, right? And that there's even a viewing system at all is like really crazy to me. But somebody wants to watch someone get put to death, die. How I integrated that was that I had a one-way mirror installed into the bathroom so that I could watch the person who is coming in, the disrobe, and they basically got no privacy. And I would watch from one end, and I wanted to be able to flick it so that they could see me also when I wanted that to happen. And I designed my space on emotion, on the way that I enjoyed bringing somebody through a story into my session and then out of it. And so how I do my sessions is very much reflected in how I ended up designing that first space from the ground up. And how I run a session is I've always, I think I once walked into an installation where there was a very narrow hallway and it opened up into a really lush room, and you walked out in a separate way that was quite a bit more expansive. And I really loved the headspace of that focus into something unexpected and then walking out through something again, like not that you were before. And so I designed a small alleyway towards the entrance of the play space. And then I designed a cupboard that would house the clothes and the shoes that you could take off. And then there was a concrete surface that you would have to walk across to get to the main door. And this is all closed off, like even though you'd be walking pretty much naked, nobody would see you. And I wanted it to be concrete because I wanted it to be hot. This was in Bali, yeah? So it would be very, very hot, the sun on this exposed roof. And they would be able to get their clothes later. How would I do that? I think I probably would have just brought their clothes to them. But there was also a system where I could put things in this cupboard and you could open it from the outside on your way out. But so this system, they drop off everything, they kind of shed the outside world, they walk in through this like concrete space, they start to feel a sensation on their feet. This is discomfort. And then there's like it's glass but with walls also, and then it would open up into the space. And in order for this to be communicated to architects and therefore contractors, I didn't suggest being taken through a session with me, but I did describe how it is, exactly like I am to you, how I like people to feel when they're coming in, the terror, the anticipation, the shedding of the world, the stepping into my realm. And then the procedure of mine begins. I like them to wash themselves because I don't want to, if I do touch them, to touch a surface that has been sweating, et cetera, et cetera. And I already wanted them to be under my watch. So therefore, hence the glass one way and then switch to two-way glass for the bathroom. And I also had the bathroom as a flat, all black marble, like wet area, so that it could be also for any wet sort of play. I don't know if we can talk about that on here, certain sort of excrement. But then I wanted bolts through the bathroom also, so that I could have them bolted to the ground if they were ever to be used for play. And so then the procedure of that would be that they would be showering, and then they would realize that I was watching them already. I would be on the other side, and there was a little seating area that I designed on the other side of this shower. And then after that point, I have people come in and I will like sort of introduce myself to them. There's only one chair, it's for me, and there's a soft surface for them to sort of sit on the ground on and kind of be welcomed into my space, into what might be happening within us, for us. And then there was a wider configuration of space from there. I think that in an ideal scenario, I would have multiple rooms that I could kind of move walls or curtains for different scenes, headspaces, scenarios. But in that particular space, it was just one wide open space that focused on having a wall with some gear, a cage integrated into a corner, an oubliette, so like an underground, almost like a grave, Yeah. And then I even calculated like how much time somebody could spend in there if it was totally shut off from air and things like this. And for there to be like a camera system in there and a rigging system on a very all across the space iframe and a T bondage area. Yeah. So all of these things were aspects of how I like to play, integrate things into my life. I enjoy the overnight imprisonment. I enjoy total sensory deprivation. I enjoy the idea of somebody being just put away in the ground. I enjoy the fact that I could enjoy the ceremony of tea, but also have somebody encased within bondage as an ornament there for me. I also had a viewing window out from the tea bondage corner ceremony area, and it had a how do you call it? It's the thing where you can kind of metal somebody into in standing up, so their neck and their arms, like kind of like stalks, but metal. And for that to be just a rock garden, so lots and lots of little pebbles, so that it would be very, very, very uncomfortable to stand on it. And that could be my viewing thing during the tea ceremony. And then the sink, etc., just for like clearing up, but set away. Yeah, so that it can be focused on the play. And then when there would be the wrap, the end, there was another exit that actually you couldn't really see. Yeah, whilst you were amongst the play. And they would go out this other way and it would have a skylight to it and everything was white also. And so to kind of emulate that sensation, that feeling that I enjoyed when I was entering that focused space into something unexpected, opening into another sort of exit. Yeah. And so, I mean, that space ended quite sadly. I can maybe go into that another time. But the whole process of thinking about designing it and working with contractors who didn't really understand what was happening and embodying the space prior to creating it, it was really meaningful for me. And I think it's not going to be the same for everyone, right? That a space can reflect your emotion. I think there's matters of budget and realistic spatial things. And but it was quite interesting to meet with architects and to explain to essentially vanilla people the emotion of a room according to how I would like it. I think architects obviously are going to be people who understand what that might mean, but the process of it, I think, is maybe more for like museum designers or something like this, perhaps. But that was a really fun process, and it would have ended up in something more modern than I've seen yet. I think I've seen one place in Cologne that had a similar interesting flow to it. I forget the person who owns it, a Romanian mistress. And it's kind of underground. It was very, very high sort of ceiling. Could have been like a car park, I guess. And it has some interesting spaces, but that one is more set up as like a workplace for many people to play in a work capacity. And so it didn't have the home, one person, one space sort of feel that I was going for. And so if I were to do it again, would I do it similarly? I think where my current head is at, I would focus more on having a rectangular space so that I can achieve my, because this was at funny angles in order to accommodate the rest of my house. It was to be my living space also. this previous one that I described. But I think I would focus on a long rectangular space, because then I can create that pathway, and then I can have many, many options that I can kind of close off, like I was talking about how I would separate space. And what I would do for the different spaces, I would have like a welcoming area that would be quite warm. And it could also potentially be the decompression area for when it's necessary or at the end. I would want to probably also have dinner parties there. So I would probably have like a kitchen with integrated cages into the kitchen island and the such. I actually, in my house after the planning of the dungeon, I had a lot of modern looking furniture made, but in ways that you didn't understand were also bondage devices. So I had a massive house. I'm never going to have such a huge house again, but because London, but it was in Bali, and I had this 2 by however many meter like day bed in the main living room and in my outdoor patio upstairs. And one was white and one was black, and it was leather, and it was with bondage straps on it. And then, but it just looked like a massive ottoman, really, and you could just lounge on it also. And then I had on my chrome-legged dining table, I have hard points so that you can kind of chain people, especially foot fetishists is my idea. And I had a glass top so that you could see everything that was happening. So I think that is more what I am interested in achieving. And I would have a dining space sort of like that also in my play space. I would finally get my tea bondage ceremony area together. I won't give away how I am designing the bondage for that, because I still want to make it and maybe travel with it. But that would also be a thing. And then I would have overnight confinement spaces, or a space that I have CCTV on. And then I would have a proper rigging room where it was probably a metal structure that you can do heavy bondage off of. And I think those would be my main focus areas. And there would probably be an option so that everything can kind of be opened up at once. But I think that the focus of each space would be of more interest to me. So I didn't start this episode thinking that I would go into such detail in terms of what I wanted from a space, but I guess that's what has ended up happening. But to come back to some of my initial ideas about how to get inspiration for this, I think that there are some classical references that were very much utilized in the first place that I started working in the Salon Kitty's Dungeons. So we had a big red dungeon room, which very high ceilings, padded bondage wall, a stretcher, like bondage sling, like that people get rammed on, and carpet in the middle of the room. Don't walk barefoot on it. Loads of gear everywhere. Then there was like a master bedroom where another bondage wall on a wall, lots of mirrors, a bed you could sleep on, and then chains on the bottom of the bed so you could use it as a bondage thing. And then another room at the back, which is more like a medical room with a medical chair, like a flat sort of 1950s style one, and another sling and a chair against the wall that you could do bondage on, a brass dungeon, and a sissy room, which is more pink for a poster, and a black and white wardrobe, like a walk-in wardrobe makeover sort of sissification kind of room. Yeah, was that it? I think that was it. And then, and an office, and a fake office, the office that they interviewed me in, that I thought was a real office. And then we use the waiting rooms sometimes. So, I mean, it was great facility, really wonderful to learn in, but very, very classical. Yeah. It ticked off a lot of classic boxes. And I think that the way that I've grown has integrated my play into my life. And I would probably also live in the space that I described, the rectangular space, in like a hidden away sort of room that you didn't know was there. That would probably be my bedroom. Yeah. So I think that for this process, this picture and these ideas of what I liked have grown over time. I don't think it's changed that much over the last 4 years or so. It actually hasn't changed much at all. I wonder whether I'm getting settled. But I think maybe I should make that happen. I have quite a few things going on at the moment. So that is like a couple of TV things, the AI thing, podcast, the utility belt. I have my calls, but maybe I'll see how I'm feeling by the end of next year. If things are like rolling on their own, maybe I will think about building a space. Feels very indulgent for somebody who travels so much. And I wouldn't want to rent it out either. You know how like some people rent out their dungeon spaces? It would be my home. So yeah, something for me to think about. But again, to go back to some initial thoughts around how I started to understand what this space would look like and those conversations with Danielle Blunt. I think that I'm very lucky to have found Mistress Blunt because I feel like there's a lot of commonalities between us, and it's enabled me to vocalize my internal desires more. We've never actually played together or shared space like that, but we've had a lot of chats and a lot of communing in terms of an understanding. And I think that she's far more advanced in her ability to communicate than I am. So it's probably been more helpful for me than her. But I'll take it. And she has been, in our conversations, I think I've realized more and more how enticed I am by what people hide from and what they shy away from and how they manifest that in ways that they are comfortable with, but in reality are quite absurd, such as the execution rooms, right? It represents, on one side of that one-way mirror, it represents like fear, complete loss of control, and inevitability in ways that we, as people who are still living, who have our lives more or less in our hands, can imagine, you know? And I think that I don't wish that for anybody. But I also, I'm in awe of the fact that those emotions exist. And I think that a lot of my exploration of being in BDSM is so that I have an opportunity to think and feel into what those edge of emotion experiences are like. And to be able to do that with somebody else in a way that feels shared, because ultimately I'm a social animal. And I think that on the other side of that one-way mirror, they have these seating arrangements that are far more comfortable, right, than that flat surface with the microphone. And sometimes it's these like stadium seats, but with padding on them, or some sort of chair, but that always has padding in all of these photos. It's like there's like this comfort, this element of comfort that you still want to introduce to this side of the mirror. And that it's also just very interesting for me to think about how it would be possible to sit there and to crave like a softness against your skin as you're watching somebody losing their ability to sense anything else in front of you. It's just like a scenario that I don't want perpetuated, but at the same time, emotions that I think are very interesting to experience in a container that is negotiated. Yeah, I think that it's very interesting for me to push into the edges of what we're told are difficult or unattainable or immovable or not to be gone towards because of my curiosity, but also because of my intrigue in my existence and in our collective experience. And those edges are not given enough airtime, and therefore I would like to give them some space. And I do that using my work and using the spaces that I create and that I work in. Yeah. Yeah. So there's just a few thoughts on how I envision an ideal BDSM dungeon or play space for myself and how I've gotten to that understanding on an emotional, psychological level, aside from understanding the physical tools that are going to enable that, such as the heavy bondage, such as the imprisonment, such as the entanglement with the domestic and the confusion and the ease that can also introduce. But spaces, any architects out there who are also into kink, get in touch. I might have a project for you in the new year. But thank you very much for listening, and I'll speak to you next time.